Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. Welcome back to America Under Distress, America Under Siege. Thank you all for your support. And this video is going to be around 35 minutes because it's an important one. It'll set forth many of the problems that have happened in this country over the years of how we have a tendency to get overzealous in our country and fund things that you really shouldn't fund. But it's basically, this show is going to be about the Marshall Plan, European Recovery Program to rebuild Western Europe post-World War II. I'll try to keep this loud as possible with this. I may have to get up and go to that speaker because I got told somebody says your videos need to be a little bit louder. So this is the Marshall Plan. I'll briefly introduce it, and then I'll go to about a 10 or 11 minute video about the Marshall Plan from a website that was created for the George Marshall Foundation. And I'll give him, of course, full credit for it because it's him speaking at Harvard. Basically, it acted in 1948 to rebuild, the Marshall Plan was reenacted in 1948 to rebuild Western Europe. Okay, it was a brainchild of Secretary of State George C. Marshall. He was also a 5-star general of the Army during World War II. He was actually over Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Forces Commander during World War II Pacific. And actually European theater, mainly the Pacific, was Nimitz, and then European theater, which was Eisenhower. It was a 4-year plan between 1948 to 1952 where the funds went to them, but it was actually planned out during 46 and 47. Okay, it was to foster commerce, economic stability, break trade barriers, because the entire structure of the world at that time was devastated because there was war everywhere. And it's also cited as the beginnings or the dawn of the Cold War. And it did, because at the last section of this video, I will tell you about one of the provisions of this that was to stop communism. It funded an organization that has a very nasty reputation, even though they do work to protect the American people from international sources, which is the Central Intelligence Agency. Okay? And also George C. Marshall, which is Secretary of State, he received the Nobel Peace Prize for this work. A 5-star general, I think, is the only 5-star general that ever received a Nobel Peace Prize for its work because it saved Western civilization as we know it by what they did in this plan. And it was enacted in 1948 by the 80th Congress. President Truman, a Democrat, was president at the time. So let's go to the video, and let's go. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, here comes the video. Again, I will do my best not to talk too much during this video. It is approximately 11 minutes, 31 seconds. I'll stop it a little bit short, but pretty much the entire video you will get this with some commentary from me, but not too much. Okay, here we go. It's Mr. Marshall, Secretary of State.
Mr. President, Dr. Conan, members of the Board of Overseers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm profoundly grateful, touched by the great distinction and honor, great confidence afforded me by the authorities of Harvard this morning. I am overwhelmed, as a matter of fact, and I'm rather fearful of my inability to maintain such a high rating that you've been generous enough to accord to me. These historic and lovely surroundings, this perfect day, and this very wonderful assembly, it is a tremendously impressive thing to an individual in my position. But to speak more seriously, I need not tell you that the world situation is very serious. That must be apparent to all intelligent people. I think one difficulty is that the problem is one of such enormous complexity that the very mass of facts presented to the public by press and radio make it exceedingly difficult for the man in the street to reach a clear appraisement of the situation. Furthermore, the people of this country are distant from the troubled areas of the earth, and it is hard for them to comprehend the plight and consequent reactions of the long-suffering people of Europe, and the effect of those reactions on their governments in connection with our efforts to promote peace in the world. And considering the requirements for the rehabilitation of Europe,
I have to say something now because that was a very profound statement that we entered the war to keep England surviving and basically democracy alive and our way of life surviving in Europe and around the world. We in the United States have a tendency to don't think internationally, and most of in devastation where a man or somebody that died in battle, died overseas, was devastating. I cannot comprehend that. I do know of my fellow brothers and sisters in the Marine Corps and other services that have lost their lives. It's devastating to me, but especially their families. But the death and destruction we did not see in this country. They did. That's what he's talking about.
Physical loss of life, the visible destruction of cities, factories, mines, and railroads was correctly estimated. But it has become obvious during recent months that this visible destruction was probably less serious than the dislocation of the entire fabric of European economy. For the past 10 years, conditions have been highly abnormal. The feverish preparation for war and the more feverish maintenance of the war effort engulfed all aspects of national economies. Machinery has fallen into disrepair or is entirely obsolete. Under the arbitrary and destructive Nazi rule, virtually every possible enterprise was geared into the German war machine. Long-standing commercial ties, private institutions, banks, insurance companies, shipping companies disappeared through loss of capital, absorption through nationalization, or by simple destruction. In many countries, confidence in the local currency has been severely shaken. The breakdown of the business structure of Europe during the war was complete. Recovery has been seriously retarded by the fact that 2 years after the close of hostilities, a peace settlement with Germany and Austria has not been agreed upon. But even given a more prompt solution of these difficult problems, the rehabilitation of the economic structure of Europe, quite evidently, will require a much longer time and greater effort than had been foreseen. There is a phase of this matter which is both interesting and serious. The farmer has always produced the foodstuffs to exchange with the city dweller for the other necessities of life. This division of labor is the basis of modern civilization. At the present time, it is threatened with breakdown. The town and city industries are not producing adequate goods to exchange with the food-producing farmers. Raw materials and fuel are in short supply. Machinery, as I have said, is like...
That's why the country being dependent on itself, not being dependent on another country, is so important. When there's problems somewhere else, you can still feed your people. That's why it's important that you have a government in this country, and every government, that they can produce what their citizens need by themselves, so they're not dependent on somebody else. The interdependency is too high right now.
Or worn out. The farmer or the peasant cannot find the goods for sale which he desires to purchase. So the sale of his farm produce for money, which he cannot use, seems to him an unprofitable transaction. He therefore has withdrawn many fields from crop cultivation and is using them for grazing. He feeds more grain to stock and finds for himself and his family an ample supply of food. However short he may be on clothing and the other ordinary gadgets of civilization. Meanwhile, people in the cities are short of food and fuel, and in some places, approaching the starvation limit. So the governments are forced to use their foreign money and credit to procure these necessities abroad. This process exhausts funds which are urgently needed for reconstruction. Thus, a very serious situation is rapidly developing, which bodes no good for the world. The modern system of the division of labor, upon which the exchange of products is based, is in danger of breaking down. The truth of the matter is that Europe's requirements for the next 3 or 4 years of foreign food and other essential products, principally from America, are so much greater than her present ability to pay that she must have substantial additional help or face economic, social, and political deterioration of a very grave character. The remedy seems to lie in breaking the vicious circle and restoring the confidence of the people of Europe in the economic future of their own country.
Exactly.
And of Europe as a whole.
Of their own country.
The manufacturer and the farmer throughout wide areas must be able and willing to exchange their products for currencies, the continuing value of which is not open to question. Aside from the demoralizing effect on the world at large, and the possibilities of disturbances arising as a result of the desperation of the people concerned, the consequences to the economy of the United States should be apparent to all. It is logical that the United States should do whatever it is able to do to assist in the return of normal economic health in the world, without which there can be no political stability and no assured peace. Our policy is directed not against any country or doctrine, but against hunger, poverty, desperation, and chaos. Its purpose should be the revival of a working economy in the world, so as to permit the emergence of political and social conditions in which free institutions can exist.
Free institutions.
I am convinced, must not be on a piecemeal basis as various crises develop. Any assistance that this government may render in the future should provide a cure rather than a mere palliative. Any government that is willing to assist in the task of recovery will find full cooperation, I am sure, on the part of the United States government. Any government which maneuvers to block the recovery of other countries.
This is important, ties into the dawning of the Cold War.
Cannot expect help from us. Furthermore, governments, political parties, or groups which seek to perpetuate human misery in order to profit therefrom politically or otherwise will encounter the opposition of the United States.
Political parties, personal
It is
opinions.
already evident that before the United States government can proceed much further in its efforts to alleviate the situation and help start the European world on its way to recovery,
That's Mrs.
there must be some agreement
Roosevelt.
among the countries of Europe as to the requirements of the situation and the part those countries themselves will take in order to give a proper effect to whatever action might be undertaken by this government. It would be neither fitting nor efficacious for our government to undertake to draw up unilaterally a program designed to place Europe on its feet economically.
On its feet
This is the
and its
business of the
people.
Europeans. The initiative, I think, must come from Europe. The role of this country should consist of friendly aid in the drafting of the European program and of later support of such a program, so far as it may be practical for us to do so. The program should be a joint one, agreed to by a number, if not all, European nations. An essential part of any successful action on the part of the United States is an understanding on the part of the people of America of the character of the problem and the remedies to be applied. Political passion and prejudice should have no part. With foresight and a willingness on the part of our people to face up to the vast responsibilities which history has clearly placed upon our country, the difficulties I have outlined can and will be overcome. I am sorry that on each occasion I have said something publicly in regard to our international situation. I have been forced by the necessities of the case to enter into rather technical discussions. But to my mind, it is of vast importance that our people reach some general understanding of what the complications really are, rather than react from a passion or a prejudice or an emotion of the moment.
Kind of wish we'd
As I said
do that
more
now.
formally a moment ago,
We always
we
react.
are remote from the scene of these troubles. It is virtually impossible at this distance, merely by reading or listening or even seeing photographs and motion pictures, to grasp at all the real significance of the situation. And yet, the whole world of the future hangs on a proper judgment. It hangs, I think, to a large extent, on the realization of the American people of just what are the various dominant factors, what are the reactions of the people, what are the justifications of those reactions, what are the suffering, what is needed, what can best be done, what must be done. Thank you.
What must be done for the people. Without politics, without emotion, not reacting. That is so important. And I have to say, I don't see much of that today. All I see is partisan politics. Everything based on a political ideology. Well, that's why I wanted you to hear it from George C. Marshall's voice, okay? Some people do videos where you just play a short little clip and then basically do your commentary from that. I wanted you to hear it from the man himself, the man who helped save Western Europe and basically capitalism at the time. So that's why I did it that way. And the other way's fine too. But basically, you saw in the pictures, there was devastation, basic survival of the infrastructure. The roads were not taken care of. The river systems, the ships were not there. The cars, the trains, the trucks. And then the bridges and the basic infrastructure. An Infrastructure or Recovery Act is about those things. Okay, I'm going to tell you something for us today, which is the infrastructure bills in Washington, D.C. 1.75 trillion or 3.5 trillion. That, whatever is passed, must be infrastructure, how this country functions to get the job done on a day-to-day basis, getting the food to people, getting food shipped in, shipped out, trucks, all those things, and the support systems around it. It should not be pork belly. In other words, what that means is basically it's putting it in something there for your district that has nothing to do with the infrastructure bill. The practice that we're doing today about doing that is not in the same format as what George C. Marshall was talking about. We must keep those personal opinions and ideologies and things that we want personally out of it. Not for politics, not Republican or Democrat. When Truman was president at the time in 1948 to 1952, he did it for Republicans too. He did it for all races and colors. He didn't do it just for one group of people. That's not how you do these things. But I have to get to the point where I have to say, then, the Soviet Union was negotiated with by the United States and the Allies at the time because they were feared, the Soviet Union was fearing that we were going to take over the world. And we were fearing that they were going to take over the world. And at the same time, we were negotiating with the Vatican because a big part of the communist system was the Vatican was afraid that they would take religion out of the world, which is what they did in the Soviet Union, which is what Mao did in China, which a lot of these totalitarian countries do. They take religion out of the equation. In other words, the government does it for the people. In other words, takes a way for you to have your faith, how to solve problems in your life, okay? That's what was important to the Vatican. There could be no compromise at the time, so basically the Soviet Union and the allies of Eastern Europe, which turned into what is called the Warsaw Pact. The pact that created out of the Marshall Plan was NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And the one actually in the Pacific was CETA, Southeastern Atlantic Treaty Organization. They were all the allies of the United States, NATO and CETA. And there's other ones too, but the big ones were NATO, CETA for us, and then the Warsaw Pact with the Soviet Union. Basically, they funded it. During this 48 to 52, Soviet allies and communist allies got none of it, hardly anything from us, okay? Because they were against the ideology of the United States. That became what is known the Truman Doctrine, okay? Wherever communism was, we would fight it. May not be physically troops on the ground, boots on the ground as we call it, but financial resources and things like that to stop the spread of communism. Okay, and of course it was through funds and resources. Okay, at the time, I have different numbers, but 46 and 47, when the Marshall Plan was instituted, it was around $13 to $15 billion in 1948 dollars, okay? That $15 billion is now translated to $170,723,365,145 in 2021, which was as I calculated it last week. There's other figures, other sources that I found when I was doing this program, researching for it, 13 billion. So I did it on the 15th. So you can do your calculations, you can look it up for yourself. Okay? But there's also another reason why we did this. And I have to say this for myself. What happened was, as a history teacher, I consider World War II very important in world history, but I also consider World War I more important in world history. Okay, that's why I'm wearing a quasi French uniform, King Louis XIV and Louis XVI. That's how they dressed. They were kings and they were queens. When World War I happened, when Ferdinand was killed in that shooting, caused a flare-up World War I, and basically all the organizations and the Allies came together, and 4 years later, in 1918, Germany was defeated with its allies. Okay? At that time, they were blamed for everything. They wanted Germany to pay. Britain, France, and the United States. At the time, it was the League of Nations, which wasn't even passed in the United States system. They didn't like the League of Nations because it was too much power into European hands, where they didn't allow the United States to make its own decisions. It sounds a lot like the United Nations today. Basically, they had to pay for everything, retributions and reparations to the Allies. Okay, I'm getting a little feedback, so I'm going to try to speak up louder. So, also at the time, ground was taken. Germany had invaded parts of France, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, and Lithuania. They took land, they took possessions, land basically. They wanted the European countries, wanted them back. I apologize if I pronounce the names incorrectly. Alsace, Lorraine, back to France. Sarre-Melody, back to Belgium. Memel district to Lithuania. Okay, those are just a few of the territories. There's more. There was a lot of provisions in this Versailles Treaty, which is what it's called. And also Germany was restricted to have an army, a standing army, how many soldiers she is allowed to have, how many tanks, how many ships, all their basic weapons of war was restricted based on the Versailles Treaty. Okay? And also, too, you have to think about World War I. You see all this technology, you see all these they kill people. And basically what is called the military-industrial complex of that country, how it makes war. Before World War II, you had all these weapons of technology, which got more with the V weapons and nuclear weapons and things like that. But before World War I, you had ships, but you didn't have planes. You didn't have airplanes. The submarine was being perfected. The airplane was being perfected. The shippings were being perfected. The tank, that banana tank, the British had, that banana-looking thing, I'll try to do shows on that. That was where all these weapons of war came to fruition at that time. And also something will be very instrumental in a lot of other shows that come down the road is chemical warfare. Okay? The use of chemical warfare goes back a lot earlier than that, but it got more synthesized during World War One. And I'll briefly mention another project once I get to it. Basically, at the time of 1920, the cost for the United States is around $33 billion. Now, they said around 2019 it's $423 billion. So, we also now have to get to something that is very damaging in the future. The Cold War. This is considered the dawn of the Cold War. Okay? After World War II, there's a project I briefly mentioned before, was Operation Paperclip. I'm going to redo that show because I just feel I need to do it better. So basically, Operation Paperclip came through Operation Overcast and Operation Paperclip. It went through the Allies, but mainly it was the United States and Great Britain. So Operation Surgeon is what some of them call it in Great Britain. Those scientists brought back so much technology and so many different kinds of ideas for weaponry that the Nazis were trying to do at the end of World War II. The V2 weapon system was the forerunner to the ICBMs, nuclear bombs, payload systems, dirty bombs, chemical bombs, nerve agents, blister agents, sarin gas, Tuban chemicals, and they got weaponized, okay? All those things came from these scientists. And forerunners like Fort Detrick, USAMR, which is the one that we have now, which is still in operation now. Those scientists were being recruited by us. The other shows after that, I'll cover those as well, which is Fort Detrick to USAMR. So what was happened because of the funding, the $15 million, guess what we did? 5% of that $15 billion at the time went to funding the CIA, and they used it to have front companies to fight communism. Remember in the video where he said, any country that's through an ideological way to manipulate people, communism, fascism, totalitarianism, they will not be a friend of ours. We will stop the spread of communism. The Red Scare during the 50s and the 60s and the 70s up to the 80s, always fighting communism. Those projects and those things went through 5% of that $15 million started in 1948 to the CIA. And the next show, after the Museums for the CIA, I'm going to be covering Fort Detrick to USAMR. Okay? Fort Detrick is the first one that was at a base in Maryland, and USAMR is still there. It's just different parts of it. These front companies, which I'll go into right now, which was part of that 5%. And each one of these companies made money. And a lot of these companies got contracts through the U.S. government on top of that. So what does that say? That is basically our military-industrial complex skyrocketed. And you also have the NASA, you have the space program, you have chemicals, you have all kinds of other things that the military-industrial complex funds, and that went through all this money, okay? In those days, nobody cares about what's in a bill in a spending package. Most people don't care what is in it now. I read them. For the most part, I know what's in them, and what we have now in the infrastructure bill, there's a lot of it that has nothing to do with infrastructure. It's about politics. But I'm going to say now are the front companies that were created post-World War II to now. I'm going to say about 15 or 20, maybe a little bit more, that was the front companies to fight communism and anybody that was against it through the CIA. Here we go. I'm going to put this down. They're in areas, like I said, of all kinds. One were magazines, one was Aeroplane. That was 1979. That was from the Shell Corporation. Actually did torture flights for the CIA. In other words, they would capture somebody and they would put them on the plane and they would torture them to get information from them. I'm not going to get into each detail with each one of them, but basically, everybody's heard of Air America. 1947 to 1976, and after 1976, it went to civil air transport. Okay, Air Asia, which is Taiwan, Air Cultural Committee, American Cultural Committee, American Committee on a United Europe, Arizona Helicopter, Brewster Jennings Association, Civil Air Transport, like I said, Continental Air Service Inc., which was closed, and then it got bought out by part of Continental Airlines. They're not doing anything now that deal with the CIA that I know of. Couldn't find them. I would have told you if they did. Encounter Magazine, Free Trade Union Committee, Al Hawar Magazine, International Commission on Jurists, which are lawyers, National Student Association, Mundo Nuevo, these are more front companies, the Pacific Corporation, Air America Radio Free Europe, America Radio Liberty, Robert Mullen Corporation, Seaboard Rural Air. These are just to name a few. Like I said, they all made money, and that went back in their coffers. Now they have Swiss bank accounts, Cayman Islands accounts, and things like that. So basically, that's the gist of this show. I will also give you on the top of the video about how much money in millions, not billions, because in those days it was mainly millions for each country, which was about 25 countries were participating in this. I'm going to give you the numbers before I close. Was of that amount that I said, 1948, $15 billion, that's $750 million, almost $750 million. That's a lot of money now, but still it's not the amount that we spend now. So of $750 million went to the CIA for those companies in the fight against communism. So that's 5% of that 15 billion. Now, like I told you those numbers, now today that 15 billion is 170 billion, 732 million, $365,145 in today's dollars. That amount that would go to the CIA on that amount in 2021 is $8,536,618,527 to fund CIA operations, civil wars, and all kinds of other nasty things. Again, I have to say, the CIA gets a bad rap. They've done a lot of weird things that they should not have done. They've done some things that will blow you away. In the Fort Detrick to the Salmon video, I'm going to tell you about some projects and show you some videos that will just blow you away that I never saw before until I started this channel. Okay, so once this is out there, once I send this out there later today, I will send you out a couple videos from, not from the CIA, about the CIA. I'm going to start a series of just sending out 2 or 3 minute clips. I won't do any talking in it, I promise, on those. I'll just put them out there for you can look at, for you can see, and you can make your decisions on that. So coming back today, I have to say the most important thing we do as an American citizen is to be literate, to be intelligent, and to use this, not use this. We are too much into politics. We are too much into the politics of the time, the emotion of the time, blaming somebody else. It's always the Democrats' fault. It's always the Republicans' fault. I'm sick of hearing that crap. The American people need people in Washington that actually give a spit about the American people. Just because you're a Republican or a Democrat, I'm not going to support you. If you're on the other party, you can go blow. If that's how you think, you need to go. Get that freak out of here. You're always blaming the other parties. There's going to be a couple other shows that I'm going to get to. I'm going to actually make some fun and cartoonies amongst these politicians. It's going to be tied to a part of my reading. But it comes down to it. You go to freaking Washington. You go there to serve us, not yourselves. I'm sick and tired of them always serving themselves. Their party, their agenda. They don't even want to listen to the other side. When they have the numbers in the House and the Senate and the presidency, they don't want to work together. They just shove it through. And they don't look into the other people's opinions. Okay? I'm going to do, like I said in the other videos, in the preliminary ones, I'm going to start a reading, like I started last time, from Animal Farm. The Animal Farm is an allegorical story, a novelette from George Orwell. It was written in 1945. They were abused, they were oppressed by the owner of the manor, Animal Farm, the owner, Mr. Jones. And they revolted. And just as what happened was they wanted their freedoms, they wanted to be able to live off their wages and to have a better life for their family and their farm and their friends and everybody around them. Just be treated fairly. But what happened was the system they put into it was worse than the one they left. Okay? When you look at it that way, and the allegorical story about this book, Animal Farm, is basically tailored against the Soviet, Stalin's organization once the Bolsheviks took over after World War I, and basically the Stalin organization, which was post-World War II. You can put this into any totalitarian country, the Soviets, Chairman Mao, the CCP, Venezuela, all these other dictator, one world government types of organizations. Once they got their rebellion, they basically came up with the 7 commandments of the farm. They were, number 1, whatever goes upon 2 legs is the enemy. Animals, man. 2, whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. You're separating 2. You're my friend, you are the enemy. If you're not that, you're not my friend. Number 3, no animal shall wear clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animal shall drink alcohol. No animal shall kill another animal. And 7, all animals equal. In the preamble of the Constitution, we say, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, we're all equal. In a paraphrase, I didn't say it exactly word for word in a paraphrase. That's what they wanted to do. You'll find out through the course of these readings, that's not what happened. Power corrupted absolutely, which is what's happening in Washington today, and that's why I'm doing it. The next video will be a couple videos about the CIA. There'll be a couple, 2 or 3, maybe more. It'll only be about 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 1 or 2 is a very short, just so that you can see what I'm talking about. These people have done some really bad things, but they're also trying to protect us, okay? Support Wounded Warrior Project, support Useful Charts. A lot of research I do is based on genealogy lineage that I get from Useful Charts. Support Epic Times, but may also support Bill Moore Citizenship Scholarship Fund for a scholarship for a deserving person in North Canton, Ohio. I also set up an account for the Gaige Robbins Citizenship Scholarship Citizen Fund for the same thing here at Gallie High School. This channel supports, like I said in the retooling video, education. That's important. Being an educator, I wanted to do that for this channel. So it's all tax deductible for the 2 scholarship funds. I appreciate you bearing with me. I won't see you soon anymore today physically because the other videos will go out. But the next one that I'll be in is Fort Detrick to Yosemite, and more of Operation Paperclip will be in that. A lot of those scientists are from Operation Paperclip and Operation Surgeon. And actually Unit 731, look that up if you want. It's another organization that was pretty nasty during Japanese occupation of China. Thank you. See you soon. Semper Fi.